Well, from Harris's Landing, we've come to Trenton, New Jersey. I wanted to say just a few words about George McClellan, who's buried here in this cemetery along the river. The obelisk that you see in front of you in the background marks the spot. George was a good general. He was a smart general. If he had a defect in character, it was that his heart was not hard enough to accept the idea of incurring casualties under circumstances in which, from a military point of view, it wasn't absolutely necessary. It was a fault that ruined him. It's hard, I think, for the Civil War writers and the historians to criticize George for abandoning his line of communication on the York River Railroad. If you're not a general, if you're not a Civil War general, and you're not at the scene, it's from the point of view of proper military practice, it's awful difficult to say that you would have done it differently. It was a real close call. But once he moved off to change his base and reach Malvern Hill, I just can't see objectively facts in the record that justify George abandoning his position at Malvern Hill. The Beverly Plantation and the Shirley Plantation were right behind him. There just wasn't any need that I can see for him to continue to move his army further away from Richmond and all the way down to Benjamin Harrison's wonderful home at Westover. And from the point of view of politics, which is what is going to kill George, when Abraham Lincoln arrived there on the steamer Ariel and saw that home, like you've seen it, saw how George had settled into it, saw how far he'd come from Richmond in his retreat, heard his new plans about crossing the James and attempting to approach Richmond from that side of the river, it's just not a surprise that he wasn't happy. Why Lincoln didn't fire McClellan right then and there and replace him with another general with instructions to stick where he was and to move forward up the river and renew the battle, the answer has to be there wasn't one. There wasn't another human being in military uniform available to Lincoln who he could slip into that slot. He tried to get Burnside to get in that slot, and Burnside wouldn't have anything to do with it. That's why he's calling John Pope from the west, because he's got to get a body in place, and it's going to be a hell of a thing for him now to do, because in moving that army back, as you're going to see, he's opened a window for General Lee to get onto the offensive by moving north against Pope. And we'll follow General Lee now north, at least as far as Thoroughfare Gap. And we'll say goodbye to George. He does have some honors. There is a statue, a monument. He's on a horse in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. on a little teeny little wedge of land. That was placed there in 1907, funded by Congress and the Society of the Army of the Potomac. There is a square statue of him in front of the Philadelphia City Hall. George was born in Pennsylvania. The reason he's buried here is that he became governor of the state of New Jersey after the war for a period. And then he went on and moved on to New York. He had a son who became mayor of New York City. His wife, Mary Ellen, at the time after his death in 1885, she left the United States a very bitter woman. She went to Nice, France, where many, many years later she died. But I believe that her remains were returned, and I think we'll find her name here. I can't say for sure that her remains are there. If there's any defect in the man, it was that he had a soft heart. He didn't like to see young men shattered and heaps of bodies laying on the ground dead. He couldn't stomach that. Now Grant, on the other hand, had no problem. You might also recognize that the comparison between Grant and McClellan during this period of time, Grant was moving forward. Fort Donelson, Shiloh, Corinth, whatever his political problems were, he was moving forward, whereas George, at the same time, was moving backward. And the contrast just hurts. So while I'd like to puff him up a bit and give him more standing, it's a tough thing to be able to do. Let's walk over and get a closer look at his grave.
He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his